The Chicago Sky are one of the worst basketball teams I've ever seen. And today, their coach literally just waved the white flag. He quit. He literally just said, Phoenix Mercury, destroy us even more than you're destroying us right now. He basically benched all of his starters not long into the third quarter. Just gave up.
I don't know what's wrong with them. But, like, they could lose this game by 40. Like, I don't know. I don't know what is wrong with this team. Because today it wasn't even... I don't even think that this was an effort thing. Like, I don't even think this was an effort problem. But at the end of the day, like, they're just not good.
Because, and Chicago Sky fans, hell, they're ready to run Tyler Marsh's ass out. I mean, the way he's playing Angel Reese, I'm going to be real with you. I mean, the one thing she could do was rebound the ball, and he has taken that away. He has taken that away. So much for coming off a triple-double.
Yeah, I think that, we got a couple players that are banged up, so we want to be mindful of minutes. I think that, when the game got out of hand there midway through the third, for us, there was more preservation at that point. And players were almost at their limit anyway, being on a back-to-back, and so we wanted to be mindful of that. And, if the game wasn't as out of hand, then maybe it would have looked different, but we got to be healthy and ready to go into Atlanta tomorrow. We got 3 games in 4 days with LA on that following Tuesday. So we got to be mindful of having healthy bodies so that can give us as good of an effort as we can going into tomorrow's game.
Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today, we're not just talking about a basketball team having a bad season. Oh no, we're peeling back the layers on something far more spectacular. We're diving headfirst into the raging dumpster fire that has become the Chicago Sky's 2020 for WNBA season. Imagine a team hyped with new talent, a coach with championship pedigree, and then it all just crumbles. Not gradually, not with quiet dignity, but in a blaze of turnovers, historically bad defense, and a moment so surreal it deserves its own wing in the sports blooper hall of fame. We're talking about a coach, mid-game, looking at the scoreboard, looking at his players, and essentially just quitting, waving the white flag, benching his entire starting lineup not for rest, not for strategy, but because the carnage was simply too much to bear. This isn't just about losses. It's about a public surrender, a franchise in freefall, and a star player whose post-game optimism seems to exist in a completely different dimension from the on-court reality. So grab your popcorn, maybe a stiff drink, because the story of the Chicago Sky this year is a masterclass in how not to build a contender, and it's a saga you won't soon forget before we get to that game, the one where the white flag was metaphorically hoisted high above the United Center. Let's set the stage. The Chicago Sky didn't just stumble into this disaster, they sprinted towards it with arms wide open. Coming into their fateful matchup against the Phoenix Mercury, the Sky were already drowning. They'd lost 5 of their last 6 games. They were averaging a league worst, almost comically high, 18.9 turnovers per game. To put that into perspective, that's like gifting your opponent nearly 19 extra chances to score every single night. It's a number so astronomical it makes you wonder if they're playing with a basketball or a greased watermelon. This wasn't just a team struggling to find its rhythm. This was a team actively performing basketball self-sabotage on a nightly basis, looking less like a professional sports franchise and more like a chaotic experiment gone horribly wrong. Their 3-9 record at one point wasn't just disappointing. It was a screeching alarm bell signaling one of the worst starts in WNBA history. And then came the Phoenix Mercury game. If the season up to that point was a slow-motion car crash, this was the moment the car hit a ramp, did a triple axel, and burst into flames on national television. It wasn't just a loss. It was, as some commentators brutally but accurately put it, a public execution broadcast in high definition. The Mercury didn't just beat the Sky, they dismantled them, atom by atom. Phoenix stormed out to a commanding 31-18 lead in the first quarter. The Sky, true to form, committed 8 turnovers in that opening frame alone, leading directly to 13 points for Phoenix. It was like watching a horror movie where you know the jump scare is coming, but it's still terrifying when it happens. The Sky were not just outplayed, they were outclassed, outtussled, and seemingly out of their dashed up dot, but the real, jaw-dropping, did that just happen? Moment came midway through the third quarter. Phoenix was shooting the lights out, hitting 56.5% from the field and an almost unbelievable 57.1% from three-point range. They opened the third quarter with an 11-3 run, ballooning their lead to a chasm-like 25 points. And Coach Tyler Marsh, the man brought in with a championship pedigree from the Las Vegas Aces, the supposed architect of this new Sky era, looked at his bench, looked at the scoreboard, and made a decision that will echo through his coaching career. He pulled his starters, not just one or two. He benched both Angel Reese and Kamilla Cardoso, his two prized rookie bigs, essentially signaling to the entire basketball world that he'd seen enough, that he'd rather preserve what little dignity his players had left than watch them get further humiliated in a game that was already an abject disaster. It was less a strategic substitution and more a mercy killing of the Sky's competitive chances for the night. Coach Marsh's post-game explanation was, as you might expect, a masterclass in damage control. He talked about player preservation, being mindful of minutes on a back-to-back schedule, and players being at their limit. He suggested that if the game hadn't gotten so out of hand, maybe things would have looked different. "We got to be healthy and ready to go into Atlanta tomorrow," he said, trying to spin a capitulation into a strategic masterstroke of load management. But let's be brutally honest, anyone with functioning eyeballs who watched that game saw it. For what it was a coach who had reached his breaking point. It was a surrender. The team was getting annihilated, morale was visibly shattered, and Marsh seemingly decided that enough was enough. The final score, a soul-crushing 107-80 defeat, barely tells the story. Phoenix hit a season-high 17 three-pointers. The Sky, ever generous, turned the ball over 21 times. Sammy Whitcomb of the Mercury hit 5 threes in the second quarter alone, turning the United Center into her personal shooting range. This wasn't basketball, it was a public service announcement about what happens when potential meets reality, and reality arrives wielding a sledgehammer. Now, let's talk about Angel Reese, because perhaps the most baffling, frustrating, and frankly, cringeworthy subplot in this entire Chicago Sky meltdown is watching Angel Reese navigate the wreckage during her post-game interviews. The woman has become a walking, talking embodiment of cognitive dissonance. She stands there, night after demoralizing losses, talking about staying poised, looking for the next shot, and maximizing off turnovers, while her team is actively setting records for futility and she herself is struggling mightily on the court after that Mercury debacle, where she managed just to rebound in a game where rebounding is supposedly her calling card. She was still talking about getting those 50-50 balls and taking things personal. It's a level of spin that would make a seasoned political strategist blush. One particularly telling moment came when Reese, who had a statistically nightmarish start to her WNBA career, addressed winning the Bed Sportswoman of the Year award. She spoke about how she doesn't complain and comes to work every day. This from a player who, in one game against the Liberty, went 0-for-8 from the field. Through her first 7 games, she was averaging around 9 points on a dismal 30.9% shooting. These aren't just rookie struggles, these are numbers that scream inefficiency. Yet, the positivity in her interviews remains relentlessly, almost defiantly, disconnected from the on-court product. She talks about giving ourselves grace and being super happy where we are as a team right now. Super happy? Well, the team is getting boat race nightly and setting records for turnovers. It's like being on the Titanic after hitting the iceberg and praising the quality of the onboard shuffleboard courts. She was shooting around 28% from within 3 feet of the basket at one point, the basketball equivalent of missing open layups in an empty gym, and yet was talking about expanding her range to include mid-range shots. The disconnect is staggering. In one particular soundbite that made the rounds, Reese stated, "Obviously, it really meant something to other people today cause it's me, and I just focus on basketball. I come in and work every day and work. I don't complain. I haven't been playing well at all, and I can sit here and just mope around and point the finger, but it's been me, and I take accountability." She then talks about her teammates trusting her and loving being part of the team. While taking accountability is commendable, the repeated insistence on working every day and not complaining starts to ring hollow when the on-court results are so consistently poor and the team is visibly imploding. Fans, and indeed analysts, have pointed out that her rebounding numbers, often her strongest asset, seemed inflated in college by her high volume of missed shots, allowing for more offensive rebound opportunities. In the WNBA, against bigger, stronger, more skilled opponents, that inefficiency is being brutally exposed. When she's not taking as many shots, or when the team offense is stagnant, those rebound numbers have often plummeted, as evidenced by the rebound game against Phoenix. The Brick Llama, as some cruelly but descriptively nicknamed her college persona due to missed layups, seems to be struggling with the transition, and the forced optimism isn't fooling anyone who's actually watching the games. Now, let's turn our attention back to Coach Tyler Marsh. This is a man who arrived in Chicago cloaked in championship pedigree. He was an assistant coach for the Las Vegas Aces during their back-to-back WNBA title runs. He was supposed to be the basketball sage, the developer of talent, the one who could unlock Angel Reese's raw potential and mold Kamilla Cardoso into a dominant interior force. He was supposed to bring that winning culture, that strategic acumen, to a Sky franchise looking to rebuild. Instead, he's become the unwilling face of a franchise in utter disarray, a poster child for what happens when high expectations collide with immovable incompetence, whether from players, management, or a combination of all factors. That third-quarter surrender against Phoenix was the breaking point, the moment that will likely define his tenure in Chicago, however long it lasts. His post-game talk of preservation felt like a desperate attempt to reframe a moment of clear capitulation, but this wasn't an isolated incident of frustration boiling over. Marsh has been delivering increasingly blunt, almost exasperated, post-game messages for weeks. After one particularly turnover-plagued loss to the Liberty, where his team coughed it up 22 times, he told reporters, "We can't continue to beat ourselves." He spoke of the team having more offensive possessions than their opponents in some games, only to hurt ourselves with turnovers, and a lot of that is our own doing. This is classic coach speak for, "My players are making baffling decisions. They're playing like basketball chaos agents, and I'm rapidly running out of diplomatic ways to explain this to the media without explicitly throwing them under the bus and getting myself fired." Critics have also pointed to his in-game management, questioning his timing of timeouts, his offensive sets, and his ability to make effective adjustments when the tide turns against his team. The perception is that he struggles with the flow of the game, lacking the instinctive feel that separates good coaches from great ones, especially when adversity hits. To truly appreciate the depths of this Chicago Sky collapse, we need to look at the horrifying, historically bad numbers. Their 0-2 for start to the season tied the worst beginning in franchise history, and things didn't magically improve from there. The team's minus 60-point differential through their first 2 games was the worst mark through 2 games in the entire history of the WNBA. Let that sink in. This isn't just losing. This is being historically, monumentally outscored. In one game against Indiana, the Sky managed to score just 52 points, their lowest defensive output since 2011. They've had stretches of giving up 91 or more points in 4 consecutive games, all while struggling to even crack 80 points themselves. This isn't just a slump. It's basketball persecution on a biblical scale. The defensive statistics paint an even more gruesome picture. At one point, Chicago had the worst defensive rating in the league by a significant margin, hovering around a disastrous 113.6 while allowing opponents to score an average of 94.3 points per game. They were the only team in the league that hadn't managed to hold a single opponent under 90 points for a long stretch of the season. Teams were shooting a blistering 45.1% from three-point range against them. That's not just bad perimeter defense, that's basically laying out a welcome mat at the three-point line and inviting opponents to an all-you-can-shoot buffet. Every game became an unintentional three-point contest, with the Sky playing the role of the Washington Generals. The calls for Marsh's job, and indeed for a roster overhaul, grew louder with each embarrassing defeat, as one commentator bluntly put it, "It's not just a coaching issue, it's also a player issue," pointing fingers at underperforming veterans and questioning the overall talent level and fit of the roster. Perhaps the most tragic individual subplot in this sprawling disaster is watching the immense talent of Kamilla Cardoso get buried under the mountain of team dysfunction. In that same Phoenix game, where everything fell apart, Cardoso quietly had a very efficient offensive night, scoring 17 points on an impressive 7 of 9 shooting. That's the kind of performance from a rookie big that should be celebrated, a building block for the future. Instead, it was completely overshadowed, a footnote in the larger narrative of the team's utter collapse. The body language on the court often tells the entire story. Multiple reports and keen-eyed observers have documented Cardoso's visible frustration during games, particularly when the offensive flow breaks down, often due to a teammate's poor decision-making or missed shots. She's been spotted looking towards the bench with an expression that screams, "Get me out of here," like someone desperately seeking an emergency evacuation from a slow-motion train wreck when Coach Marsh made the decision to bench both Reese and Cardoso simultaneously in that fateful third quarter against Phoenix. It wasn't just about resting to rookies. It was a tacit admission of systemic failure. Cardoso had been playing efficient basketball, doing her job. Her teammate, Reese, was struggling mightily. Benching them both sent a clear, albeit perhaps unintentional, message: even the good individual performances can't overcome the overwhelming tide of incompetence and dysfunction that has engulfed this team. One player was struggling to execute basic post moves. The other was making the most of her opportunities. Pulling them together felt less like strategy and more like a coach throwing his hands up in despair at the entire situation, unable or unwilling to differentiate between individual effort and collective collapse. In that moment of crisis, the Chicago Sky's problems extend far beyond individual player performances or questionable coaching decisions. This is a franchise mired in a full-blown identity crisis, a crisis that seems to have started with wildly unrealistic expectations and has now spiraled into complete organizational dysfunction. They entered the season with hype surrounding their rookie class, but they seem to have forgotten that successful WNBA teams are built on more than just potential and social media buzz. They require shooting, defense, veteran leadership, and a coherent offensive system. Instead, the Sky constructed a roster that, as the season has painfully demonstrated, struggles mightily in several of these fundamental areas. They can't consistently defend the perimeter, they lack reliable outside shooting to space the floor, and, as evidenced by those astronomical turnover numbers, they often can't even protect the basketball, averaging nearly 19 turnovers per game, as they were, isn't just bad, it's historically catastrophic. For context, most successful, well-coached WNBA teams typically average around 13 or 14 turnovers per game. The Sky are essentially spotting their opponents 5 or 6 extra possessions every single night, and then acting surprised when they lose by double digits. Analysts have pointed out that teams quickly figured out the Sky, pack the paint, dare them to shoot from outside, and feast on the inevitable turnovers and missed shots. The perimeter defense has been particularly porous, with players struggling to fight through screens or offer effective resistance, leading to those wide-open threes for opponents. While injuries can play a role for any team, the Sky's issues seem far deeper, rooted in roster construction and a fundamental lack of cohesion. Good teams find ways to compete and adapt. The Sky, too often this season, have found new and inventive ways to make every challenging circumstance significantly worse. As we watch this agonizing season continue to unfold, the central question is no longer whether the Chicago Sky can somehow turn things around and make a miraculous playoff run. That ship has not only sailed, it has sunk, been salvaged for scrap, and is now an artificial reef. Coach Marsh's decision to bench his starters mid-game against Phoenix wasn't just a moment of frustration, it felt like a turning point, a public acknowledgement that competitive integrity, for that night at least, had taken a backseat to sheer damage control. It was the moment the fight seemed to leave the team, and by extension, its coach. Angel Reese's continued on-court struggles, juxtaposed with her relentlessly optimistic and sometimes reality-defying post-game interviews, have become a form of appointment television for basketball masochists, those who derive a perverse sort of entertainment from watching raw potential get systematically dismantled in broad daylight. Her interviews have evolved from hopeful to perplexing to a category that can only be described as talking about continuous improvement while visibly regressing in real time. The claim that she's expanding her game rings incredibly hollow, when her shooting percentages are worse than her rookie season in college, and basic fundamentals still appear to be a challenge against WNBA level competition. It's like watching someone confidently assert they're learning to fly as they step off the edge of a cliff. Anyone who watched Reese's extensive college tape could see the glaring shooting deficiencies. Anyone who understood the leap in physicality, skill, and defensive strategy from college to the WNBA knew that raw athleticism and a high motor wouldn't be enough without significant refinement and development of her skill set. Yet, the Sky organization, whether through miscalculation, desperation for a marketable star, or a combination of factors, chose to largely ignore these bright red warning signs and instead appeared to build a significant part of their immediate identity and marketing around a player who simply wasn't ready for that level of responsibility and scrutiny. At least not without a much stronger supporting cast and a more patient developmental approach. Tyler Marsh's coaching tenure in Chicago, however much longer it lasts, is rapidly becoming a cautionary tale. It's a stark reminder of what can happen when championship pedigree from one environment as an assistant meets a movable, systemic dysfunction in another. His decision to effectively wave the white flag against Phoenix, while perhaps understandable from a human perspective of wanting to end the suffering, also symbolized a complete surrender of competitive expectations for that game and perhaps for the immediate future of the team. The Chicago Sky's 2024 season will almost certainly be remembered as one of the most spectacular and public organizational failures in recent WNBA memory. It's a multi-layered masterclass in how unrealistic expectations, questionable roster construction, poor player development, and a stubborn refusal to confront harsh realities can combine to create a basketball disaster of epic proportions. A disaster that entertains neutral observers with its sheer dramatic ineptitude while simultaneously crushing the souls of the team's actual fans. And so, as the losses mount and the excuses wear thin, one can almost picture the scene somewhere in Chicago. Tyler Marsh is likely polishing his resume and contemplating his next career move, while Angel Reese is meticulously practicing her next post-game interview, searching for new and inventive ways to speak about staying positive and working hard through adversity, even as the ship sinks further into the abyss around her. The Chicago Sky aren't just losing games. They're losing credibility, and the path back looks longer and darker than ever. What do you think is the root cause of the Chicago Sky's disastrous season? Is it coaching, player performance, roster construction, or a perfect storm of all three? And where do they even begin to pick up the pieces? Let me know your unfiltered thoughts down in the comments. If you found this breakdown compelling, or if you're just morbidly fascinated by sports train wrecks like I am, please hit that like button and make sure you subscribe for more deep dives into the stories making waves in the world of sports. Thanks for watching, and try to have a better day than the Chicago Sky are probably having.